I wanted to also acknowledge the dangerous and backwards court ruling in Arizona Friday evening. This is a complete abortion ban, one that forces survivors of rape and incest to carry their pregnancies to term, and women with medical conditions could face dire health risks. Healthcare providers would face imprisonment of up to 5 years for fulfilling their duty of care. This ban would take Arizona women back to more than 150 years and subject them to a law from 1864, a time before Arizona was even a state. Arizona is now the 16th state where Republicans officials have stripped women of their rights through extreme, unconscionable statewide abortion bans.
Hello and welcome to What the F*** Just Happened Today, your essential guide to the daily shock and awe in national politics. I'm Joe Amditis. Let's get to it. It's Monday, September 26th, 2022. Welcome to day 615. An Arizona judge ruled that an 1864 ban on nearly all abortions in that state can be enforced, lifting a 1973 injunction that barred enforcement of Arizona's pre-statehood ban. The 1864 law mandates a 2 to 5 year prison sentence for anyone who helps a woman obtain an abortion and makes no exceptions for victims of rape or incest. The law was updated and codified in 1901. Judge Kelly Johnson cited the Supreme Court's decision in June overturning Roe v. Wade, which established a constitutional right to abortion as rationale for lifting the injunction. Johnson's ruling came a day before Arizona's 15-week ban on abortion was slated to go into effect. Joe Biden, meanwhile, vowed to codify the right to an abortion into law if voters, quote, give me 2 more senators in the United States Senate, end quote. Moving on, Trump's attorneys are attempting to assert attorney-client and executive privilege over grand jury testimony to prevent witnesses from sharing information in the DOJ's January 6th criminal investigation. Earlier this month, the federal grand jury issued more than 40 subpoenas to former Trump aides seeking information about the role that Trump played in the attempt to overturn the 2020 election, including the plan to create fake slates of pro-Trump electors in swing states which were won by Biden. The legal dispute, which is currently under seal, will determine how much evidence prosecutors can use from Trump's conversations in the West Wing and with attorneys as he tried to overturn the 2020 election. Meanwhile, Mark Meadows texted with an election denier in late December 2020 about attempts to gain access to voting systems in Arizona and Georgia. Phil Waldron, a retired Army colonel with ties to Michael Flynn, helped draft language for an executive order directing the Pentagon and Homeland Security to seize voting machines, and he also sent Meadows an options for January 6th PowerPoint presentation which outlined a plan to overturn the election. Meadows recently complied with a DOJ subpoena for information about the 2020 election, including these text messages. Moving on, the Biden administration announced $1.5 billion in grants to fight the opioid crisis. Last year, more than 107,000 people died after overdosing in the United States, a 15% increase from the previous year. The grants will be used to expand access to treatment and recovery services, invest in better overdose education, and increase the accessibility of naloxone products. Meanwhile, the Congressional Budget Office estimates that Biden's plan to cancel student loan debt for millions of American borrowers will cost roughly $400 billion over 10 years. The CBO says it expects 90% of the 37 million borrowers with loans from the federal government to take advantage of the plan, which would cancel up to $20,000 in student debt for lower and middle-income borrowers. And finally, the United States warned Russia of catastrophic consequences if Vladimir Putin uses nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said, quote, it's very important that Moscow hear from us and know from us that the consequences would be horrific, and we've made that very clear, end quote. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan added that, quote, in private channels we have spelled out in greater detail exactly what that would mean, end quote. The comments from Blinken and Sullivan come after Putin addressed Russia last week, saying that if Russia's territorial integrity was threatened, quote, we will certainly use all the means at our disposal, end quote, to retaliate, adding, it's not a bluff. And in the polls, Gallup says 23% of Americans approve of the way Congress is doing its job, the highest rating in 2022. 75% disapprove. The Washington Post and CBS News say 66% of voters believe the November election is more important than previous midterm campaigns. 68% of voters feel that their rights and freedoms are at stake in the midterm election. ABC News says 56% of Democrats say their party should replace Biden as its nominee for president in 2024, while 35% favor Biden for the nomination. 47% of Republicans, meanwhile, think Trump should be their 2024 nominee, a 20-point drop compared with his 2020 nomination. And Politico says pollsters are afraid that they're blowing it again in 2022. Democrats seem to be doing better than expected with voters, but if the polls are wrong, they could be disappointed in November again. That's all for now. You can find the links and sources for all of these stories on the main website. And as always, visit whatthefjusthappenedtoday.com for the latest news and headlines. Until next time, I'm Joe Anditas.